Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Here's Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. Cuba denounces media blockade on COVID success. This story takes the lead in our 938th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Wednesday, 9th September 2020. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. The government of Cuba denounced what it called a media blockade at the international level on the country's success in confronting the COVID-19 pandemic. In a message on Twitter, Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said the scientists on the Spanish-speaking communist island shared their advances with the world, showed protocols against the pandemic and the results of vaccine candidate. However, this was not reported. Cuba is the only country in Latin America with a COVID-19 vaccine candidate in a clinical trial that has been approved by the World Health Organization. On Thursday, Cuban experts exposed advances in the vaccination for COVID-19 when they appeared before representatives of the Pan American Health Organization. In a video conference also held with experts from Senegal, they widely shared details about medical protocols as well as Cuban biotechnology products. In other news, the 2021 budget in Trinidad and Tobago is to be presented in the Parliament by the Finance Minister early October. The announcement was made as the country faced increased expenditure due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Keith Rowley made reference to the pandemic when he said the new budget will be a budget with a difference. TV6's Jewel Brown reports.
As Finance Minister Colin Imbert announced via a statement from the Finance Ministry that he will be reading the budget for fiscal 2021 in the House of Representatives on Monday, October 5th, he said the ministry will host a virtual spotlight on the budget and the economy on September 28th from the Hyatt Regency Hotel. The government's 2019-2020 financial year ends on September 30th and its 2020-2021 financial year begins on October 1st, but this is not the first time a budget statement will be read in the Parliament in October. In a recent telephone interview, TV6 News posed a question to the Energy Minister, Franklin Khan, about the fact that the budget is based on crude oil and natural gas prices at a time of depressed prices for both commodities due to the COVID-19 crisis.
The challenge will be what we will peg the oil and gas price in the budget. The Minister of Finance and myself will have to discuss that at length. We look for the most reliable source in predicting the market. And we have been fairly accurate in the past in doing that, even except unforeseen circumstances, especially this COVID-19 situation.
Less than a month ago, on August 18th, the same day the EBC confirmed that the PNM won the August 10th general election after having completed recounts in 5 marginal constituencies, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley fielded a question from TV6 News about the budget. In terms of the budget, how would that be worked out? Was there any major delay in terms of the preparations for it?
Well, we lost a week, but it's not fatal. But we were hoping to go straight into that. As I said before, immediately after the election results were settled, the major assignment of the government would be to get on to preparing a budget. Because this budget is a budget with a difference. Because we have to cater for the pandemic nuances which are not normal in budgetary preparations and, of course, servicing the country in the normal way.
The Prime Minister then said Budget 2021 is one that requires a certain amount of footwork.
And that's why the elections were called early to ensure that the new government had ample time to put a budget in place, and that budget has to be in the Parliament by September, which is 4 weeks from today, and be passed by October. So we are now positioned to do that. Some of the things that would find its way into the budget were commitments made during the election campaign.
In a tweet last Friday, Finance Minister Colm Imbert announced that in keeping with the PNM's commitment in its 2020 General Election Manifesto, Cabinet agreed to remove all taxes on laptops, tablets, and notebook computers with immediate effect. Minister Imbert said in another tweet, also in keeping with the PNM's manifesto, that taxes are earmarked to be removed on other devices such as mobile and digital equipment, cell phones, software, and accessories in the Finance Act of 2020 after the completion of the budget debate in or around December 2020. Dr. Rowley made no mention of any specific campaign promises when he spoke on August 18th.
And whatever commitments we made during the election campaign, we now take the position that we have a mandate to do that. And therefore we have to seek to fund those things in a budget in a time when our funding is tight and we have to cater for extraordinary expenses to keep the virus fight going.
As he announced that Budget Day will be on October 5th, Finance Minister Imbert said the Finance Ministry is in the process of asking business organizations, trade unions, and other interest groups for recommendations on the fiscal measures and initiatives they would like to see in the 2021 budget in the context of what he called, quote, our current restricted financial circumstances, end quote. Minister Imbert said all recommendations will be given careful consideration. Jewel Brown, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. The United National Congress in Trinidad and Tobago is weighing in on the two recent measures government has taken to assist in adaptation of the new normal brought on by COVID-19. The UNC's Public Relations Officer Anita Haynes gave her position on TV6's Morning Edition. Alicia Boucher of TV6 News has the details.
The United National Congress says COVID-19 should not have been the determining factor as to whether children had technological devices in their possession or not. The party's PRO, Anita Haynes, believes the tax exemptions on laptops is not something that government should be patting itself on the back for.
This is something that they did. In 2016, they introduced these taxes. And you did not need a pandemic to tell you that students needed access to virtual learning. The global society has been moving that way for years. It's only this administration that seems to be unaware of it.
Haynes is criticizing the People's National Movement for cancelling the laptop program, which allowed for all Standard 5 pupils sitting the secondary entrance assessment exam to be given devices. She says had the program not been abandoned, the need for laptops for students would not have been as critical at this time. But the decision to instead place the devices in schools where multiple students can benefit from a single device was taken based on what government had indicated was a strategy to prevent gross mismanagement of the laptops.
We can now see that didn't make any sense because now that the laptops are in schools, who can use them now? There's that the reason you have laptops versus desktops is that laptops are portable.
Haynes says what should have followed was an alternative that would have ensured equitable access to technology, as she believes the present system does not target those who are most vulnerable. On the new approach being taken by the government to get nationals home in what is being referred to as a liberalized exemption policy, Haynes says it seems somewhat baffling. She feels that prior to the general election, when COVID-19 numbers were very low in the country with no community spread, government's policy on allowing nationals to return home was more stringent. She says the narrative was that numbers could have spiraled out of control.
Miraculously, after August 11th, now, when COVID numbers are at a rise, you are now able to say our nationals have to come back home. I don't think I need to say much here. They ran on their performance on COVID. They ran their election campaign on their COVID, on their management of the COVID situation. And within days after the election, the situation unraveled.
Alicia Boucher, TV6 News.
There is a contentious draw in the Westmoreland Eastern seat in Jamaica, and based on the method used by the returning officer in that constituency, the PNP candidate has been declared the winner, bringing their representation in the House to 15 to the JLP's 48. Details in this TVJ News item.
Director of Elections Glasspool Brown is arguing for an amendment to Section 48, subsection 8 of the Representation of the People Act, ROPA, which speaks to the role of a returning officer if there is a tie on a final count for a seat. Mr. Brown wants it to state clearly the options of the returning officer for casting a ballot. The section in question states, quote, "Whenever on such final count of votes an equality of votes is found to exist between both or any two or more candidates and an additional vote will entitle one of such candidates to be declared elected, the returning officer shall give such additional vote." The issue has arisen following Saturday's recount in Westmoreland Eastern, when both the Jamaica Labour Party and People's National Party candidates had the same number of votes. The returning officer in casting a ballot picked the People's National Party's Luther Buchanan from a blind draw yesterday. Attorney General Marlene Malahou-Fort has disagreed with the method used by the returning officer to select the winning candidate, arguing on Twitter that he cannot, quote, "lawfully determine the outcome by putting two ballots in a box and drawing one," end quote. Speaking on the morning agenda on Power 106 today, the Director of Elections stated that the returning officer chose the method for casting his ballot, as ROPA did not define the process.
Guide himself in terms of the process that he will use. He can either assess it based on a number of factors, and he can maybe use whatever method he deemed fit to use. And in this case, in Eastern Westmoreland, he decided to draw from a hat. Well, from a hat, it's a box.
Okay.
Actually, it was placed in the ballot box, and then he blindly selected a person. So he used that as a guide for him to make that decision, which is it is right to do so.
Jamaica Labour Party candidate Daniel Lawrence was declared the winner by 8 votes following Thursday night's preliminary count. His legal team is making arrangements to apply for a magisterial recount.
Jamaica's People's National Party PNP has declared that it will be an effective opposition in spite of losing roughly 16 seats in the most recent election.
People's National Party, the PNP, has declared that it will be an effective opposition despite the reduction in its numbers in the House of Representatives. Following the September 3 general election, the PNP has 15 members of Parliament elect to the Jamaica Labour Party's 48. Observers have been calling for incoming opposition MPs to find ways to effectively fulfill their parliamentary obligations, including the chairing of or occupying seats on oversight committees, as well as critiquing legislation and government policy. PNP Chairman Fitz Jackson is promising a strong parliamentary opposition.
Steadfast and strident in fulfilling our oversight function in the Parliament on behalf of the Jamaican people. We will be relentless. We will be forceful in our fulfillment of that duty.
And public commentator Nicole Gordon says Mark Golding or Julian Robinson would be suitable candidates to take over the presidency of the PNP. PNP President Dr. Peter Phillips last week announced that he will step down from the post following the crushing defeat in Thursday's general election. Ms. Gordon was speaking yesterday on Radio Jamaica's weekly news review program, That's a Wrap.
I think that the challenge for them is that perhaps those who have the fire in the belly at this point in time may not be the most suitable option. So when you look at Hannah and Bunting, who seem to really want it, they don't appear to be the better option. But Golding and Robinson, who don't seem to have that fire in the belly, appear to be the better candidates.
Can they be fired up?
That's the point. I think that is the challenge for the PNP. But and so there has to be a way to get to them and see, for example, as you say, if they can be fired up.
I am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.